Hi, I'm David Gale, and this is ACTRA Spotlight. Cara Ricketts is an award-winning actor who has shown amazing versatility in a relatively short amount of time. She starred in video games, she's played leading roles at the Stratford Festival across North America and on Broadway. She's also the first female person of color leading character on CBC's Anne with an E, for which she won an ACTRA Award in Toronto. Oh yeah. Cara was also number 2 on the call sheet for CBC's reboot of Street Legal. She's passionate, fiercely dedicated to her craft, and has a great laugh. And despite her success, she has learned not to take anything for granted. Listen and find out why. So, this is a crazy time we're in. How are you holding up? I know we're all dealing with it in our own way. How are you holding up in this COVID-19 experiment, I like to call it?
It's been at first, so I had on my Instagram, I had created a little hashtag which was called COVID-19 Hangout. And that lasted for maybe about 2 weeks when I started to realize that this was not ending. It just kept going. I was like, this is the longest hangout ever. So it's been a nice mixture of, meditation, finding myself, deep depression, wondering what I'm doing with my life, and also worrying about the rest of the world, but also excited that there's a possibility of, or excited at the possibility of what happens after this.
Mm-hmm. How do you mean? What do you anticipate?
Well, it's like the 1920s, they just came after a major plague as well and the war, and it led to creation, super wild creation, and just this need of experiencing life, which oddly enough, at the beginning of this year, I tend not to really hang out with groups and stuff. I hermit myself away and then, have tons of close friends or.
This is in real life or is this in COVID life?
This is in real life.
Oh, real life. Okay.
So
Okay.
COVID is not too far away from real life, but it hurts more because I had a choice before.
Mm-hmm.
I could choose not to go and do something, and now it was mandatory. But I decided to go to a group event, and I went to New Year's Eve in Times Square for 2020.
What?
And yeah, it was brilliant. And now I just really, I can't help but think about it more and more now that I'm stuck inside and I can't touch people, which sounds weird, but even, a small interaction of shaking hands is not an option right now. And
I guess New Year's Eve, you could at Times Square, you couldn't help but touch people.
Exactly.
It was try to not.
Yeah, touching strangers. It's exhilarating, really. We need to do more of that once we get back up again.
Maybe you should write a book, Touching Strangers. Do you think people would get it?
Oh, definitely. It's going to be in the self-help aisle. Post-quarantine, touching strangers. It'll be I think I can make a movement out of it.
Oh my goodness. It's
How about you?
I'm I call it my captivity. I actually am doing quite a few Zoom meetings.
Yes.
And we're doing the ACTRA Toronto stuff by Zoom as well. So sometimes there's some weeks where I really develop Zoom butt, and it's just but this isn't about me and my butt.
But so the moment it started happening, I grabbed gear. I was like, I don't know how long this is going to last. I should get microphones, and just be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got a Zoom account for 2 months and started reading Shakespeare with my friends on Zoom. And it was great because I would direct them through, we were doing Midsummer Night's Dream, and it would be about an hour, and then it would be done really loose. You're here, I'm here, let's play. And then I was invited to do a workshop reading with a theater company on a new play. And we went through the day like a regular rehearsal, about 5 hours. I was losing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I didn't love the situation, but it's like being at an endless table read. Right?
An endless table read with a light shining on your face.
Yes, and
looking,
you're watched.
Yeah, and it's a lot more complicated than just a table read, because we're exhausted after a table read anyway.
Exactly.
This is a table read with a light shining in your face and people can see you.
Well, the best way to, I think Zoom is this perfect mix of theater, radio, and film and TV. So yes, it is a table read, but it's a close up. You're in a close
Mm,
up for the entire table read,
yeah, yeah.
and people can
You
see, you
you
know.
really come away from a Zoom meeting knowing what you look like. There's like no way to get, oh, okay, that's me right now.
Oh,
Like,
David, let me tell you something right now. If you go into settings on Zoom, everyone who's listening to this, there's a little tab behind the background stuff, but it's called like make me prettier or something.
yes, I have that on. Oh yes, and I believe it is called Make Me Prettier. Is it working? I know this isn't a visual for
Oh,
people,
it
but
is. It
thank
is,
you.
Dudley.
No, you're just saying that because it's true. Um, so, you had just come off of winning the Outstanding Performance Female for the ACTRA Award in February.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You had just
Thank
come off of that for your heartbreaking performance in Anne with an E, which
thank
was just dynamite. And within a month, everything is closed up tight.
hmm
What had you had on hold? What did you have to step away from?
I had to step away from a few gigs actually, like it's going to sound a bit, but I was working on something in Montreal that was being shot in bits and pieces, and then I was also working with another company. One of the things that I love is that I'm not allowed to really talk about some of the projects that I'm working on. So I sound like a really cool spy, but at the same time, I can not be working and be like, yeah, I was just so busy. The truth is
That's
I
right.
wasn't busy at all. But I was in 3 projects. And then even just before, um, I had 3 projects that uh, one of them is just, I don't know what's happening with it. The other one, thank goodness, was essentially a voiceover project. So we are figuring out how to make it work if possible. And then, which is really hopeful, actually. A friend of mine who lives in New York but works in Virginia just recently took a picture in a VO booth. So I don't know what the rules are in Virginia or how they're handling it. But the great thing about doing VO work, for the most part, you're usually by yourself. So if they can disinfect that, or if you can build a studio at home, that's always really great.
That's voiceover. You're talking about voiceover for people
Yes,
who are not in
excuse
the
me.
biz. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's okay. That's okay.
VO is for voiceover. And then the other project, it was tied with a major network, and I should have been working on it like since last year. So it was like it was getting pushed into infinity anyways. So I didn't really miss it. Oddly enough, my career has been this endless, like the moment I expect something or hope for something, it doesn't happen, or it'll happen years later. So I just where my head was at in terms of COVID, it was just like, ooh, new challenge. How do we work around this or figure this out? And that's kind of where it's been at. And it's been, people have been adapting to this weird place. Like I've done maybe 2 self tapes. Who knows what's going to happen with those? But I have been doing Zoom table reads and um, just exploring artistically. I've been reading Anne of Green Gables on my Instagram and interacting with fans that way too. And that's, yeah. And also doing this Shakespeare thing. And at one point I'm like, I've started a production company on my Instagram, which I'm not getting paid for, but it's been paying off in the way that um, people do leave comments and likes and say this is helping me through this particular thing. And the other thing, I did actor vocal warm-ups, the kind of stuff
Mhm.
you do before theater. I started trying to put those up too, not super successfully, but I would put those up because I had super anxiety coming out of this. I had just moved to a new apartment in lockdown while lockdown was going on in New York. And at one point, some crazy lady was really angry at me and spat on me on my walk. And I was like, I can't deal. I can't deal.
Oh, man.
And so I'm dealing with all of this. Plus, I had been traveling. I'd just gotten back. I traveled to Montreal, then I traveled to Toronto, and then traveled to Washington as lockdown was happening. So I was moving all over the place, but I felt the world getting smaller and smaller. And it all kind of came to a head when I had moved into this new apartment, which was smaller than my first apartment in Harlem. And I'm hearing sirens go off like almost, I wouldn't say hourly, but like every couple of hours.
When was this? In
This
March?
was like in March, because I flew out of New York on the 25th. I had decided to stay in New York when lockdown was happening. And then there was also like lockdown in the city of New York itself. But then when I had heard that the borders had been closed, and there was somebody that I was listening to, and he was like, you know, statistically, you're probably going to lose someone close to you. And I just went, oh my, like, I'm out here essentially chasing my dream by myself. And I could get sick and end up in a hospital by myself. But even worse, like, I think I could deal with that. But I would be absolutely heartbroken if I had not gone and seen my family, like at
Mhm.
least touch base in some way. And then the huge fight was, do I go? Could I be asymptomatic and show up and just kind of spread this virus amongst the people that I don't want to spread it to? Or, you know, do I stay? And then finally I was like, it's hitting me in my head. It's, the whole thing was just anxiety inducing and traumatizing, that I was like, I'm going to take the chance. And then I called my mom and she was like, oh my God, finally, thank God. Come home.
She didn't want to push it, I guess.
She didn't want, it's so funny because it's like, in this business, there are so many times, I guess it's also dependent on the kind of person you are and how hard you're chasing whatever. And I don't mean that in a good way, actually. Like, you know, you're chasing this dream. And so you miss out on things. You miss out on friends' weddings. You miss out on huge family events. You miss out on the passing of family members.
Yeah.
You know, like you could be doing a show and like the show's got to go on and, you know, a family member has passed away and you literally don't go to these things.
Mhm.
And so COVID was that as well. And it was a matter of me saying, I had to process. I had to be like, statistically, what are the chances of this? If I stay here, what does that mean? And casting offices are closed anyways. It's all going to be remote. And that's when I was like, well, I got on Amazon, made a few purchases, and got a Delta ticket for super cheap and flew home. And my mother was so happy. And I'm so happy that I did it.
And you had to self-isolate for a couple weeks?
I did mandatory self-isolation for
Yeah.
14 days.
Yeah.
My mother has turned like essentially the mudroom into like, it's gotten much more looser. But when we first came back, we all disrobed in the laundry room, threw all the clothes into the washing machine. And then, you know, so she's already been kind of hyper vigilant about germs and being clean. And, you know, I think it's been helpful in this situation.
Oh man! So you were talking about that. In fact, you're using your skills here during this time to go onto Instagram, and you're doing these coaching sessions, and you're doing classical work too. Where did you get your training? Like, where does this come from? Your ability to just be able to teach Shakespeare?
Well, you know, I mean, I watched BBC once and I thought it was super easy.
I figured you had some training somewhere. That was sort of my roundabout way of saying, where did you go to school? Whatever.
No, I love it. I went to Humber College, and then at Humber College, at the time, the program was still kind of trying to make a name for itself since the previous program director. I was there under Diana Belshaw. And so their answer to, I guess, not being NTS, which is a really crass way of saying it, but their answer to that was, instead of trying to get into classical theater or class or any kind of major theater thing, just create your own work. And I'm grateful for that, because I think that's partially where, in my mind, when it comes to this remote social media stuff, I try to practice that. Like, what can I personally do in order to create something and fulfill myself? And then after I left Humber, I went to the Stratford Festival, oddly enough.
Directly.
No, actually, what happened was I did a couple of, what came after directly from Humber was Summer Shakespeare. So I did a show in Oakville, and then I did a show in, I think, Newmarket as well. And I had played Titania 3 times. And then I had heard that Stratford had casted Antony and Cleopatra by George Bernard Shaw, which I never read, but I loved Cleopatra, the figure. Like, she looks like me, like at least
Mhm.
in my mind, being like at least maybe even Egyptian. And I was like, oh, I could have played that. In no context except that like I want to dress up like Cleopatra, and that brought me to trying to audition and get in there, and I did, and then spent 4 years there and trained under like Janine Pearson, and spent like 4 years breaking down classical texts and having it sit in the body, dropping the breath and planting and preparing myself to be incredibly overly prepared, but kind of goldfish in the moment, finding all those things in the moment, which I'm so grateful for.
Now, did you dress up as Cleopatra for your audition for Stratford?
No, I dressed up as the third witch. Rich and Mackers, like as far away as possible.
Right. Not glamorous.
Like, I kind of wish, like, the dream was like, and you should have seen my costume, like super short, curly hair, blind contacts. I was blind. I held on to my other like
Wow.
castmate. Can you imagine? And the whole time wishing to be Cleopatra.
That's very funny. So you kind of climbed up the ladder of success at Stratford pretty fast. I mean, your 4 years, you were working with some great people: Des McAnuff, Adam McGoyan, Marty Meriden. These
Brian
are
Dennehy.
Yeah, Brian Dennehy, the late Brian Dennehy. What was
Yeah.
that like in The Homecoming?
It was brilliant. It was unbelievable. I had already spent, I feel like it was already 2 years there. And I was lucky enough to play Portia to Ben Carlson in my early 20s. Like I still like, I didn't know which way was up, but I had
Mhm.
fighting spirit essentially. And the way it worked was the they had kind of said to me, if I did do the training, they wanted me to do the conservatory, which meant I would do more than 8 months at the festival. I would be doing a year. And at the time, it wasn't something that I was interested in doing. And so I didn't do I didn't do the conservatory, but I did like the first part of it. So in the season, I would literally die as Portia during Julius Caesar, and I wouldn't take the curtain call. I'd run downstairs underneath the theater to have a voice lesson.
You
You
had
know?
your priorities.
Yeah, well, it wasn't my choice.
Oh, really?
It wasn't my choice. It was really like it was like school. It was, and that's what they said, like, you know, I think if I had said no, I don't know if I would have been able to come back, or I don't know what the deal was, but I enjoy learning. So if that was the trade-off, I would do it. And it's paid off. So it's like,
It's
it's
definitely paid
good.
off.
Yeah.
Definitely. What did you do not to get intimidated by these greats of the theater?
I didn't look them up.
You're the one.
I'm the kind of person who I will look people up. I can do it now. Like I've met enough people now that I'm kind of okay with it. But early on, if I looked people up, I would be like, oh my gosh, this person did this, they did this, and they did this. And I would be shaking by the time I had to meet them. So I'd much rather just come off kind of like ditzy and cute, which was okay then. I mean, it was before. It was before the whole,
Before.
before this is a controversial statement, but it's like before hashtag me too,
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
and so
Yeah.
you could give it a bit more of the Marilyn Monroe, which is a
Hmm.
terrible way of saying it.
Well, you were
Now,
wearing a mask. You were protecting yourself.
yeah, well, that's kind of, it's necessary, and I
Mhm.
mean, there's still moments where you get into a room with a bunch of girls and you got tons of stories to tell, and so it was a way of dealing with that. But yeah, like I did find just not knowing about people in the beginning helpful, because people will tell you who they are and you can catch up somehow.
And you did mention Brian Dennehy. What he was?
I loved him. So I
Yeah.
just I was I was deep into like the vocal work and trying to be a good actor. Not even trying to be a good actor, trying to be a correct actor. I wanted to make sure I was hitting the right syllable. I was da 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 da. With the classical work, you're hitting other rhythms as opposed to being there and finding intentions and superjectives. And Brian and we were doing a crazy version of Twelfth Night that Des McAnuff had directed. And our scene started, I was playing Mariah and he was playing, was it Sir Toby? Anyways, his character's kind of like this wild guy who comes to the house, and I'm kind of, I have to look after him while also building a love interest. And our first scene would be he was playing golf, and so out of the Vom, he would throw a golf ball, but the idea is like he's chipping it and it's getting onto the green, and the ball would land all over the stage any night. Like we were aiming for the left, but it's like, you just kind of go. And so the first few times we would go, I was directed to stand on a particular side of the stage. Of course, the ball lands where it lands. And then you have to, with a stage space, in order to be seen, you've got to readjust, right?
Because it's a thrust theater. And
yes.
Yes.
And it being a 3D space. So if you're playing golf and the ball lands on the left, you can't land on the right and pretend that it's not there. So I remember we must have tried 3 times and Brian couldn't get it to the spot. And I remember the first time landing on the spot that we had marked, and it made no sense. But I remember going, okay, this is the correct way to do it. And Brian looks over at me and he's like, hey, what are you doing over there? I'm like, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And he's like, no, you're supposed to be where the ball's supposed to be. And he was like such a sweet, like a lot of people say like he's salt of the earth, just a sweet guy.
Mm-hmm.
He would tell me like these great stories of like Hollywood and stuff, and just super nurturing. And at the same time, then we did the homecoming together, which was hard work. And he just like watching him deal with people, there was no ego or anything. And he was just so dedicated to the work while also being a really sweet person. And I was really touched by it and super motivated by it. And he kind of like, after that whole golf ball thing, I don't even know if I explained it well enough, but after the whole golf ball thing, it just reminded me that, even in classical work where you feel like you've got to do things almost in a metered way, it's more fun and spicier to just get up there and throw it away, which is something you learn all the time, really. But that was just one of those moments where I was like, right. And after that, it clicked. It really clicked.
Well, they didn't have many golf balls in Shakespeare's time, so you have to improvise, I suppose.
But wait, what do you mean?
No, nothing.
I did say it was Des McAnuff's.
That's right. That's right. So after Stratford, what direction did your career take?
At Stratford, I had already begun to have an itch for film and television. I had felt like, some people kind of think that the idea is like you go to classical theater and you stay there and, but at the same time, I love that place and I would be happy to go back, but I needed to make sure that becoming a performer already is such a chance to take that I felt if I stayed there, I wouldn't really explore the chance. Mm-hmm. So the same way that I was like, hey, they're playing Cleopatra over there, I want to be over there. And then I heard that they were doing like, was it Book of Negroes? No, I think it was another project, another film and TV project with people of color. And I'm like, I fit that description. I want to be over there. And so after I had left Stratford, which I was really happy with too, the last season there, I applied for the CFC and immediately, luckily I had gotten in, but right after Stratford went straight to the CFC and fell in love with the medium of film and television. Like I always, even in theater school, when I first went to the theater school, I'm like, theater school? Okay, I'm mostly here for film and television, but I'll do the theater thing. Fell in love with theater. And, but I never understood the medium of film and television. I just thought, that's where you get famous. And at the CFC, I understood like what a dolly shot does, the feeling that gets evoked with a certain edit and all of those things. And the same way how if I get into a theater space, I know if I turn my body a certain way or if I bounce my voice off of a wall, that's what I can get out of the space. I became really interested in what I could do in a visual space,
Right. So technical aspects of it. And for people who don't know, CFC is the Canadian Film Centre, and you imagine you were in the acting program?
I was, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but they teach you the technical aspects of, you know, how tight in the camera is. So to understand which way to put your face and
Not
which
at
way to
all.
lean. No.
Not at all. That was just me
Mm.
being nosy. What happened was they taught acting technique, and they taught a little bit of like how to network, how to meet with people in a professional way, how to do interviews. But we lucked out in that they had a writing and a directing course, and they would use us in those courses. So a director would learn how to direct actors with the acting students. And the bonus of that would be the directing students would come in, they would shoot work with us as actors, and then we would review the work together. So we would review the work with somebody who came to talk about how to deal with something technically, but I would watch my friends who I knew completely only as an acting, like raw acting talent, but then watch a choice that I had seen them make before, but now see that with a slow to medium close up, you know?
Mm.
And that was like eye-opening for me.
That's fantastic that you took that opportunity, because, you know, many people didn't. I imagine there were other people in your class who weren't taking that opportunity to learn the craft that way, the
Yeah.
technical side of things. So was the Canadian Film Centre a door opener for you? In what way did it translate into helping your career?
It was absolutely a door opener. It's in the program you end up meeting the future of film and television, truly, because almost everyone in the program is somehow then tied to the business. And a lot of the people that I did work with are now like producing shows or directing episodes or doing things like that. And even while we were in the program, we would meet with like program heads of the CBC and things like that. And the more just like Canadian networks in the film and TV business that would come specifically to the CFC, and they would be kind enough to let us meet these people and have them meet us as well and know that we are around and available. And so
Amazing.
I think it played a major part in people knowing that I was there.
So when you were doing theater, you were playing lead characters in classic and modern classics. You played Hedda and Hedda Gabler. You played Imogen and Cymbeline. What talk about the availabilities of those kind of parts in film and television for you? That's a big one, I know.
It's a big one. I was thinking about this too. I was just like, film and TV. If I were to put film and TV and theater on like Tinder.
Okay, this is great setup. I love this. The first time in all of Spotlight that we've mentioned Tinder, but I love it.
In the most abstract and absurd way too, right? You're welcome. You're welcome.
There's that.
It's going to be a terrible
FM voice.
Just so you know, it's going to be a terrible analogy too. But like, I find that TV would be like, the TV profile would be a guy. I won't even say guy. Let's make it like
person.
Gender neutral. It would be a person that you're super attracted to, like physically, visually, beautiful. They drive the best. They own a lot of money, you know, and then like their profile would read super misogynistic and superficial, you know, and like as a date, they might be great. They might be awesome. They might be broke a little bit. Like they might be driving a super cool car, but sometimes they're a little broke.
Cash poor.
Yes. But at the same time, you would have to like, I feel like midway through the date, you would have to convince them, or it would feel like you're constantly convincing them that you would be like the Instagram model who shows up and go, I'm actually like worth dating. Whereas theater is kind of the guy who like smokes a lot of weed. It's like a lot of fun, super broke, super poor, but is
really smart,
really smart and interested in you, like interested in personalities and human interactions. And I'm saying this, I have to say it, that I'm describing them in terms of Tinder profiles, because this is like the general super macro view of this, because both mediums I love immensely, and both mediums have moments where you're completely blown away at what it can do. So that's a long-winded way of saying I have yet to have the opportunity of doing like the equivalent of Hedda Gabler in a film TV thing, which is, I
That,
would love to, but
and I think you're also saying that you're dating TV and film.
yes, definitely. We're both, it's
You
like,
swiped right.
our status is, it's complicated, but you know, it's pretty good.
So you have had some juicy roles. You guest starred on Orphan Black, on Law and Order, SVU. So what were the differences? Because that's one's a big American show, and one's a big Canadian show. What were the differences working on those two shows?
The difference between, well, Orphan Black, it's so funny because I still sometimes feel like I'm brand new to all of this, but I get to the set of Orphan Black and I've been working with like Mackenzie Donaldson, like Kevin, you know, like I know people on set because I am a part of this culture as much as I still have to convince myself. So getting onto the set was a lot of fun. Where film and TV was like, there's this, it might be through the, like, because I had just landed in New York and booked it, so my eyes might be a bit shinier than it was, but it felt like, ooh, welcome, we love you. Like there wasn't love, but it was just a accepted fact that being in New York must mean that you do this, and that I like the idea of playing. And we ended up shooting.
What are you talking about now?
Excuse me, Law and Order.
Law and Order,
Working on Law and Order
in New York, right?
Yes, in New York. And I didn't know anybody, just got on set. But it was like, oh, hi, honey, let's do your hair. And then my hair looked super amazing. And then we ended like going a couple of blocks up from where I lived to this part of town that I'd never been before, super fancy. We shut down the street. There were giant lights to shoot like just a scene. And then the next time I was on set, we're inside the like the police office, and we're doing like this kind of cutesy sketch, me and the guy who was playing my husband, Adam. And you know, you're like, at any moment Ice Cube could show up. Like it's really really
surreal.
Yes. And yet when I say it, sometimes I feel like it's so unfair because, okay, so I ended up also booking a Broadway show when I was in New York. Yeah, it was wild. I'm not a musical theater person. Like I did a musical theater. I can't even say it right. I ended up doing a musical in Toronto that was fantastic, that I loved. But I didn't expect to be on Broadway. And I ended up booking a show with the Roundabout Theater Company and did a show on Broadway. And I'm there again, like I know about the theater company, but I'm not really looking beyond doing the work because that's the way I can focus. Mm-hmm. Opening night comes around and like Alec Baldwin's there because he's part of the board, and all of these celebs, there's a red carpet for us after the show. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is all the stuff that I've been watching on TV. And then I think back to the Stratford Festival and I'm like, but it's no different than the Stratford Festival. It's just that this place has a machine that, you know, makes sure that all of the stars are known to the point that they're known outside of the country. So it was like, I was like, can you imagine if we had somehow been able to do the same thing in Canada?
And that's why you're on the microphone right now, because we are trying to build the star system here in Canada, one podcast at a time.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. So you get it. That sounds, so that's how the Broadway show
it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. Okay. Like, so we had our opening night.
What was it called?
It was not The Homecoming. It was Time in the Conways.
Uh-huh.
Time in the Conways by Rebecca. Oh dear, I'm gonna forget her name. But Time in the Conways, and it had like Anna Camp in it and Elizabeth McGovern from Downton Abbey, and you're like in rehearsal with these people, and you know, rehearsal was fine. All of it was fine. All of it was normal, except after each show, there would be people like lined up at the stage door, right? And I've had a few friends from the Stratford Festival, Joelle Blackman, who's in Hadestown, Paul Nolan, who just did a Slave Play. And they're people that I know personally, but every time I'm on Broadway and I see the stage door, it's like, what is happening?
It's,
These people, you
it's a
know,
star system. They want to get your
yes,
autograph. They will
yes,
wait for it. They want to gush. They want to love you.
yes. And the truth is, that's here too. Because there have been times where I've left the Stratford Festival with a show and there's an audience there who's like, I want to talk to you about this. But there's less of because there isn't like a PR system built around making the person a star. You just kind of go, hey, I really like that show. Let's talk about it. Where in the States, there's been like, photos that we shouldn't be seeing, like paparazzi shots of this person, or all this talk around, like so much talk around a person that it creates like this effervescence that by the time you meet them, you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and I find that so fascinating, so interesting. And it would be lovely if we could do that in Canada to some extent.
We'll just do it politely.
Yes.
Politely. So I think in the order of things, you did Street Legal and then Anne with an E, or am I got it turned around?
You're kind of right. It was a weird mix of, so I had done the first 3 episodes of season 2 and then booked Street Legal and then went to do episode 3, which was another 3 seasons in the beginning of season 3 of Anne. So Street Legal was sandwiched in between the 2.
Right.
Yeah.
And really different. Yeah, Street Legal. So, talk about Lily Rue, your character, Lily Rue.
Lily Rue ended up, I had a lot of time for some reason. Like I had just made enough money that I could chill out, and I knew that Street Legal was coming along. So I spent the summer before shooting Street Legal running Central Park, which is about 6 miles. I would do that twice. I would spend all day either walking or running Central Park, reading the script and like just preparing for Street Legal. And then on top of that, like literally all summer, I had never dedicated so much time to preparation. And at the same time, I was also working on a video game with Ubisoft, which is another company I love. And it was the first time that they had that they had a Black female villain. And this was in Far Cry New Dawn.
In Far Cry. See,
yeah.
You've done a few Far Cries.
I have, yes, yes. But this was like the villain role, which is kind of, you buy the game based on the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had taken a chance. It wasn't like, so Far Cry, you've got Far Cry 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they kind of have these, I guess, supplemental episode games. So you'll have Far Cry 4, I think. And then the supplemental game was Far Cry Primal, which was my first Far Cry. And it took place in like the wilderness, and it was Neanderthals and all sorts of stuff. So this was another supplemental game to Far Cry 5, but in it, they were taking the chance of putting in a Black villain. And it was me and this other wonderful lady. We played twins called...
Oh, I saw a clip of that because you posted that on your site?
Yeah. Oh
my God. That's intense. That is intense, sister. Wow.
What I loved about it was I grew up in Jane and Finch. So as a kid, I grew up in the inner city of Toronto, and it's not like, you watch rap videos. No, there was a major police shooting in my apartment building. And I would hear people yelling and screaming, and, at the same time, like my life has always been this weird mix of like one thing and another thing. So while I was living in this life in North York, Jane and Finch, in this apartment building, my mom also took me to ballet school. So it was like you'd learn ballet, and which was also this. And as a kid, I loved PBS, so I was watching Phantom of the Opera. But you also still juxtapose that to like a lot of violence and poverty and all this stuff. Anyways, so what I loved about Far Cry ended up falling into the same timeline as Street Legal. I was in Montreal shooting Street Legal, and I would take some time off to do the mocap for
performance capture.
Yes, thank you. For Mickey in Far Cry. And the great thing about the motion capture is that it's not just in the voice, like you're literally embodying all of the sweet, terrible juiciness of the character.
Yeah, it is that.
Yeah, and so I didn't fight it off, like sometimes when you take on a character, you're like, oh, I don't normally do that. Oh, okay. And so I just kept that residue on for Lily Rue. And she ended up, to me, becoming this wonderful, smart character who was like a little anarchistic and a little bit of a troublemaker. And I by the time the whole process was done, I loved that character. Like, I wish that she was another person and we could be really good friends, because I don't normally embody the kind of strength and the kind of mischief and fun that she had, and I reveled in it. I ended up getting kicked out of a comedy club in New York while I was still in Lily Rue. Well, in my Lily Rue-ness.
What did you do?
Well, David, I'm gonna have to save that one for the biography.
Okay. Well, I tell you something, that the video game Far Cry definitely affected Lily Rue, because your character was so high status, was so in her skin and powerful, even when things didn't always go your way. It was a marvel to watch. So what was that like for you when they said that they're not going to continue on with this character?
I'm still heartbroken and incredibly bitter about it. Like, if I'm that's not the right answer, but like, honestly, I'm really heartbroken by it. And I think, I don't know whether it was the time or whether it was like the way to present it. I just feel like we missed out on something there, because it felt like, I won't go as far as saying like, oh, it's like HBO quality, but to see Canadian content like that was really exciting for me. And it was just the beginning of it. Lily Rue was not polite, which,
No.
as a Canadian, for me, I was like, yes, because we aren't. We could, like, some of us are, and like, I feel like, to speak out of school, I feel like it's what we put on. I do think if someone's in need, it is our thing to do, to be very happy to help somebody out. But Canadians are also beautifully passive aggressive, like
Yeah.
deliciously passive aggressive, and can be incredibly rude.
Well, push comes to shove, we know how to shove.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I
So
am quite proud of it. And it was nice to like show that.
yeah, well, the good news is that it's available on Gem.
Very
So you can
true.
watch it for free if you want online.
Very
So if you could
true.
get a Gem account, and I highly recommend seeing it because it's a dynamic performance. And speaking of dynamic performances, on another show that's on Gem now is Anne with an E,
Oh,
a
yeah.
very a different character,
Yes.
and you were playing them both at the same time sometimes.
Yes. No, no.
No? Oh, you did.
They were
You did
sandwiched.
confuse.
They were
Uh-huh.
sandwiched in between each other. But Anne always fell in January, like earlier of the year, where Lily Rue was like fall, and Mary was definitely winter. And I say that because I feel it.
Yeah. Do you know? Did you base Mary on people that you know?
Yeah, there's this book called Celia a Slave, which is actually a narration piece on a woman. And I also read about, there was a time before this. It's hard to watch TV sometimes because I don't feel like I'm there. And when I say I'm there, I mean like physically, like that kind of thing, and how important that is. And I kept wondering, that was a question that I've always had on my mind. And it drew me to reading old newspaper articles. And I also ended up there because I was looking at my family history, and I ended up finding stories about my grandfather, who was a detective. And this is like off topic, but he ended up like he ended up outing some politicians in Jamaica by hiding in the bushes. And in this old newspaper article, it's like, Ashton Ricketts solves the case again. Like, it was
Wow.
very Frankie Drake, but it was about my grandfather in Jamaica. And so I think through doing family history searches and falling on these articles that were so intriguing to me, I ended up doing the same thing for Canada. I would look up old Canadian articles. And I remember finding a story about this woman who was a light-skinned Canadian woman who was actually, I think she might have been gender neutral, but she would pretend to be. What ultimately happened was, this white guy in, I think it was Cabbagetown, he gets shot in front of his house, and he's a rich guy, or the son of these rich people. And at first everyone's like, oh, this other guy shot him. And as they go back, they're like, oh, it's a black guy that shot him. And they go even further back, they're like, it's a woman. The woman shot him. And she ends up having this like relationship, secret relationship with him in the bars. He wrongs her. She dresses up as a man because it was what she was wont to do, goes to his house, shoots him, gets caught, and then is hired, or like one of the major Canadian lawyers at the time represents her. And his case is that because she's black, being a light-skinned black woman, she's not a human being. And this animal had made the mistake of shooting a human being. And it actually works. But what also works is, at the time, the people who were the accused didn't testify. And somehow they got her. She asked, I think, to testify for herself and say why she did what she did. And she gets away with it, and then travels America telling her story. And it was just like, I didn't sample her. I love that story, and I would love to do something with that story. But I found stories like that, like super intriguing Black historical stories, that made me go, I want to infuse Mary with that. Like, I think I might have also been a pain in the behind with Anne with an E, because I would find articles and people that could be referenced to the bog. And I was like, oh, like, can we put this in there? Or what about this? And da, 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 da. And even if we didn't use it, I knew in my head that was part of the fabric of what Mary was and what she represented. And I think like it did kind of shows up, like it does kind of show up, like her mentioning wanting to be with her community during Easter. And then they like, I think it was Moira. I don't remember who wrote that episode, but there's also that beautiful line, Moira Wally,
yeah,
the showrunner. There was also that beautiful line where they mentioned that the bog is a mixture of Black and white people, which I also find interesting with Mary and being a person of color in Canada, because our story is not exactly the same as the American story. And the shame is that we end up getting fed the American story, when the truth is, all peoples, not just Black people, all peoples were wronged at some point for their own reasons. And in the case of Black people in Canada, there was a great deal of indifference. So a white guy could marry a black guy, black woman. You could have been with them, and Canadians would just be indifferent about it. At least my understanding from the things that I've read. And so the bog existed, but it existed in this place that nobody cared enough to hate it, to destroy it. And so I think there's this weird, and again, I'm talking, this is my own armchair sociology, because nobody's teaching this. This is me gathering information. But I think you end up having this integrated, and maybe not so integrated if we do look at like Nova Scotia, but this integrated race that's just been there as like an abandoned child. Nobody cares enough to hate it, and they obviously don't love it. So it just kind of stays and becomes they're in the fabric. And so I felt that playing Mary, like I felt like it was just important, just being seen and being acknowledged. I remember driving home once from set, and the driver said to me, oh, you're in Anne with an E? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, who are you playing? And I'm like, oh, there's this character. And she's like, but Black people weren't in Canada then. And it's like, man.
Yeah. That's what you were doing on that show.
Yeah. That's totally what. And even like Lucy Maud Montgomery didn't write about the Black experience. No. And it's not that, and I'm not saying that I would have expected her to, but that's the importance that people of color had in terms of being acknowledged. And I mean, it sounds terrible, but it's kind of what we've been doing. And it's the reason why there's been such a movement for including people, because it's very easy to be like, yeah, they're around, but it's not like I'm paying attention to them, so I don't have to include them into the story.
Thank goodness that you are portraying people that existed and that the great showrunners and producers of Anne with an E shone a light on it.
All the way too. I have to say all the way, because Chernold Edwards was actually at the table, like, It's not that they just casted Black, but they were writing for people of color, and they really considered it in a wholesome measure, which is important.
So Dalmar Abdulsaid played your husband.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy on End with an E. And he also won an Outstanding Performance ACTRA Award this year for his work.
Yes.
And you won it. So is there some kind of conspiracy going on here with you guys trying to take over?
It kind of,
I don't know. I was just joking with you.
no, but you're right. You're right on something. I'm trying to process how to say it because I don't want to make it about race, which is so annoying. So much of my career and my life, like, I'm going to start being kind of, but just a couple of days ago, Ahmaud Arbery, I believe his name was, like, gunned down in Georgia for jogging.
Yeah.
And then in China, there's
75 days before he was the people were charged, the people who
Yeah.
father and son, 75 days it took before they charged.
But you know what the
them a murder.
worrisome thing is too? I believe that they were charged before, or that the charges were dropped, and that one of the people, there were 3 people who were part of the shooting, and the third guy took a video of it. And they were saying that and they were saying that it's a modern day lynching because historically, like, I mean, I might be taking it a step too far, but historically, after lynchings were done, people would collect pieces of the body as souvenirs. So
and
now
take
you've
pictures of them.
This is literally what that guy was doing. And then whoever it was, but somebody sat on this video. And so these guys were never fully charged because the lack of this video. And I was answering something about how we both ended up, and God, I'm so grateful for ACTRA. Like, I didn't expect to even be acknowledged for my work. And so to be acknowledged by my peers for the work that we did on that show was really touching. Like, it really affected me. And it still does now. But the reason why, like, I think Araya was nominated too. Araya Mengesha, who played my son. And I love that.
The whole family.
The whole family, except for the baby. And she has issues about it. But, but I remember when there's this opening scene where Araya's character comes back to Mary. And I looked across the field, and Araya and I actually worked at the Stratford Festival. We did that Macbeth together. And I was looking across the field, seeing a friend who has been on the same journey as I have, who has seen people of color get gunned down. And even at Stratford, I would walk the street, like my first year in Stratford, and people would yell. Araya and I were walking together on a street in Stratford, and a car drove by and yelled the N-word at us. And I remember that. And just being on set and looking over at Araya and seeing, like, knowing his growth and knowing that I grew with him, and then looking over at Dalmar, who is like such a kind soul and a fantastic actor, and having David, honestly, having the opportunity and knowing, because sometimes you get the opportunity, or sometimes you get like the mandated space, and you look over at your, fellow player, and it's going to be a little controversial, and I don't mean to insult anybody, but you know that they're just excited to be there, and they're not really grounded in it. So it's like, yeah, there's color there, but we're not doing the work. These were between the 3 of us, the baby included, because she's, natural instinct. So they're going to do awesome anyways. But between the 3 of us, I just knew that we were going to be doing good work as actors first. And then felt so lucky as people of color to be able to show that. And then we did. Like, I remember being in the little set, like the little hot house together, and just actually going for our intentions and making sure that they were felt, and knowing that we were actually listening to each other and reacting off of each other. And it was such a gift that, like, a part of me was like, ooh, I really hope that it is considered for some sort of award. But even if it isn't, it was such, like, those moments are irreplaceable and priceless, and they help further me wanting to continue to perform. because I know that, you know, you could do a ton of projects and you don't feel great about them, but you get lucky enough to have those tiny, tiny moments. And it's not just the fact that the three of us were together, but so the three of us are inside the house, but beyond the house, we are supported by a crew of people who are just as happy to see us, you know, true allies who are happy to see us do just as well.
And now, since that exists for eternity in and with an E, that new generations of artists and children with people of color will be able to see that this is a possibility, that I can do this work. I can be that. If they've done it and they've succeeded at it, that's available for me as well now.
Yeah.
Something which is so dynamic and so important. And I thank you for that. So it must have been heartbreaking, again, when this show that is breaking new ground and telling a story that was adjacent to the story that was originally told is then shuttered.
Yeah, but it was like...
I'm not trying to make you cry, by the way.
I know. I feel like it, though. I feel like I'd be like that David guy. But for my personal journey, I had not heard of anything. I had moved to a new part of the world. Then my hometown had called me back to finally do bigger parts than I've been normally asked to do. Then gave me the lead. Like I was number 2 on the call sheet for Street Legal. And it was also like, okay, so I'm guest starring on Anne. I've got Street Legal going on. I've just done this awesome video game in a position that's like history breaking. And all within like the next year, it was like all gone. It was all gone. I couldn't.
But Far Cry was going to continue.
Far Cry gets to continue, but you don't get to play Mickey forever. It's not like I get to play Mickey for the next 10 years of my life, you know, but it was such a super high and so forward moving that it was like the next year I had to get a side job just to make ends meet again. But, you know, I've gotten used to that too. Like I remember early days in my career seeing my name in the newspaper in a way that I had desperately wanted. And at the same time, not having enough toilet paper. And this was before the pandemic.
For a different reason, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't super organized. But, you know, the ups and downs of it has now become a really fun companion in my life.
We are precarious workers. There is no doubt of that. No doubt whatsoever. So it has been such a joy talking to you and hearing the beautiful flowering of your career and the different depths of the petals that grow in the beauty, and it's just a delight. I wish you continued success, and I imagine that you'll see it after this COVID experiment, as I like to call it, because you're a true artist, and I thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a pleasure. It's nice to like finally sit down and chat with you.
And you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Till the next time.
Absolutely. Thank
you.
Be
well, be healthy.
I'm David Gale. ACTRA Spotlight is produced by Cass Enright and recorded this time virtually at home. You can get Spotlight on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, keep watching Canadian, and please stay safe.